Now, let's begin the discussion. So we have seen very different types of star in very different processes that could shape stuff. So we have discussed merger in the case of Ithaca or another star. So and the consequence it could have on the shaping afterwards. We have seen ways to try to identify those multiplicity stuff and ways how to get information on the mass loss from the nebulae surrounding them and the different structures. Does anyone wants to begin with questions and discussions? Okay, Jesus, please.
Yes, hello. I have a question to Tina Limetz about these very extended features around the D stars. For example, the one that Bruce asked you about. Do you have any information on the kinematics of the surroundings? Because specifically this very extended S-shaped feature looks very extended to me and might be contamination from emission from the ISM. So have you tried to get some kinematics of these features?
So for that particular S-shape that Bruce was talking about, we have the kinematics. That at least the preliminary results show that it is ejected matter. But it's for the large ones, which are very extended, they're usually also very faint. So it's difficult to get kinematics because they're faint and large. So we need particular instruments to see in arc-minute scales to obtain the spectral information within arc-minutes. So it's we are trying.
That's interesting. That's interesting. That's because it seems to be very, very large. Yes, I immediately assume it was ISM. So yeah, that's interesting.
No, that seems to be part of the nebula, but some of them might be, yes, part of the ISM.
Thanks. It will be nice to see in the future those things.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks a lot to both of you. Anyone wants to react? Oh, I see Noam wants to.
Yes, I will share my screen just a minute.
Okay.
Yes, so, yeah. So first of all, I want to thank all the speakers on the massive stars. They really contribute to also understand planetary nebulae and other nebulae. So this was refreshing and very good. I would like to comment on the very interesting model of the triple star that Ryosuke Hirai and collaborators put, but I think it has several problems to overcome. This is why I prefer the binary model to explain the great eruption. So this structure that you see in Eta Carina was formed in what we call great eruption between the year 1837 and 1856, more or less. So the model of the triple is very attractive because you can play with it, but when you look carefully, I think there are problems, and it's very relevant also to planetary nebulae. As you know, I worked in several papers. I studied the cases of triple star shaping planetary nebulae, but I think these cases lead to what I call messy planetary nebulae that do not have this nice bipolar structure as Eta Carina has. So this is not an observation, this is a model of the triple star, but the first problem I see in the triple star model that it should overcome, and Hirai et al. Pointed out this problem, that they need dense material in the equatorial plane. This is the equatorial plane, this is the polar. They need dense material in the equatorial plane. We do not see it. The second problem is that to have the Kozai-Lidov instabilities, you need the plane of the inner binary and one of the triple when the system starts to be inclined to each other. So then you expect the two stars that eventually merge to be inclined to the orbit of the surviving companion. But still we see that the equatorial plane of the bipolar structure, which I don't have a picture here, is the same plane of the binary. We can learn about it because there was another eruption 50 years later, which formed also bipolar structure with the same symmetry axis. So this is another problem. Then I come to the light curve. This is a real light curve observation from 1820 to 2000. This is a period more than a PhD period. So there are different points here, some uncertainties. But what you see here are two interesting things. The first one is that there are two peaks, very clear peaks here and here, which happened in 1837 and 5.5 years later. And this whole period of 5.5 years might correspond, or actually it's almost identical to the present orbital period of the binary system. So this shows that the binary system played a major role in the outburst of Eta Carina in 1837. So I do not see a place to a third star in the system. And my final point is that there is another eruption, as I told you, called the lesser eruption in 1890 for 5 years or 7 years, as the previous speaker says, which we already do not have the third stars, but still we have a large eruption, less than the previous one. So I don't think you need a third star here. And also the symmetry is very nice with the bipolar structure. We can look at the images. So this is another problem. So Amit Kashi and I, we really prefer the binary model. There's our model also has some problems. One of them is to explain the high velocity, but I don't see how merger in the common envelope can explain high velocities, whereas jets from the companion might lead to velocity more than 10,000 kilometers per second, as Muhammad Akashi and Amit Kashi showed in a recent paper. So this was my point. These were my points on the model of the triple star. There are other models of triple stars, not only this one, like Zwart Portuguese and another other model, Ed van den Heuvel, and so on. So this is it.
Okay, I think that for that point, we go to Ryosuke for an answer.
Oh yeah, so yeah, thank you for clarifying all these issues in Itokawa models. But I just wanted to, I don't want to really sound like I'm defending the model, but I wanted to point out some of the points you pointed out. That so the outside material isn't a consequence of the triple model. It's well, yeah, maybe it's a triple because it's a consequence of the merger model, but I guess that implies a triple. But the shaping of the homunculus doesn't need to be our particular model where we have an explosion swept up by wind, but well, yeah, that is still a big issue. I think the second one, when you talked about the Kozai-Lidov, so that was required to create this the outer nebula, the outer ejectiles, and the merger plane is the mutual inclination between the merger plane and the outer tertiary star. For example, in the particular triple model I showed is 10 degrees in my model, or like I think it's like 15, I forgot. This is because we used a unstable triple model instead of something like Simone's model, where he uses the Kozai to drive the merger. In that case, you do need a high inclination. In our model, because we sent it into an unstable triple regime and let it do the chaos, it can be anything. So it doesn't need to be highly inclined. In the end, it can be aligned, it can be highly inclined, whichever. So it might be rare, but in our model, it can be aligned. I forgot what the other points were.
Well, the other point is the lesser eruption that we see here, and there's no triple anymore. So It's weaker.
Sorry. So the lesser eruption is the greatest problem for us. We don't have a mechanism to create another eruption there. Maybe that can be explained by jets. But for the previous ejections, I would say the merger itself, so the plunging of the two stars happened probably like 50 or 100 years before the great eruption. The great eruption in our model is the final merge of the cores inside the envelope. So the system essentially has already become a binary like 50 or 100 years before the great eruption. So that doesn't really conflict with your interpretation that these previous eruptions might be like jets with the binary interaction. And those intervals can just be, yeah, consistent with the 5.5 year orbit. So in my view, I think we can kind of combine, like in my view, the outer ejectiles are easier to explain with a triple model. And so I think combining the jet model to explain the homunculus.
Okay, so you have the merger 100 years before the Great Eruption. So at the Great Eruption, we had only the binary system. This is what you said.
Yes.
Because I thought that you need the merger to form this material here. And this is not 100 years, you need less time, otherwise this material.
No. So that was created by the Great Eruption, but yeah.
Okay. Great.
Okay. Good. So does anyone wants to say something? Okay, Joel, please.
Yeah, I guess just thinking a little bit further about Jesus's point, about the very large structures that are seen around the supergiant BE stars. It's the same things that we saw in our Spitzer images in the LMC. It's, something like half of the supergiants, the B bracket E supergiants in the LMC, have these very extended structures around them, and I guess, I think the thing to keep in mind is that these stars have lifetimes. They have progenitor masses of something like 30 solar masses and up in many cases. And so their lifetimes are going to be a few million years, perhaps, in main sequence. And it's actually kind of difficult to separate, perhaps, conceptually, the pre-main sequence from the main sequence from the post-main sequence phases of these stars in some respects. So, I think the bottom line is we're likely seeing the interaction of the energetic winds of the previous O star with the material out of which it formed, and that's a lot of swept up material to play with. And so the structures that we're seeing are, I guess, what Noam calls messy nebulae in almost every case, I think. And that's maybe to be expected given the environments in which these things find themselves. That's, in that respect, they're very different from planetary nebulae, I think. A lot of planetary nebulae anyway, where we kind of, at least on these kinds of scales, can forget about the ISM. So that's just a comment.
Okay, great. We had one of the pictures I showed in the opening was one nebula where you have some ejectas close to the star, but indeed you have this huge bubble created by the O star in previous phases. So yeah, it's complicated, but well, what would be the fun if it was not complicated, right?
Yes, there's a lot of fun in these supergiant BE stars. I don't know if you saw the comment that I inserted in the Slack channel, that we only looked at these BE supergiants by accident because of my negligence in vetting our source list, which we thought for the LMC was just AGB stars and planetary nebulae, and in slipped these two stars with HD numbers. So I guess the moral of the story, especially for the younger researchers, is take advantage of your mistakes if you possibly can.
You can always get surprised. I think the history of science is full of surprise with stuff you did and didn't know what you finally get. It can be very funny. So, any other reaction on any of the talks, or just about massive star and comparison with the low mass star stuff? Does anyone wants to react? Okay, so we are nearing the end of the session. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Martin and his team because they are doing a huge amount of work for making everything work for us. And well, I will let him the last word, of course.
Okay, thank you very much, Jael, for sharing this session. Well, we have exchanged ideas between the people working on low and intermediate massive stars and those working on massive stars. I think it's been very helpful for all of us. Well, we are going to meet in about 1 hour, and then we'll be talking about some specific planetary nebulae and protoplanetary nebulae. See you in a short while. Thank you very much to everybody attending the meeting.